So welcome, welcome to the Bridge Online. And most of you are already very familiar with the Bridge, so we won't go over a lot of the details and things like that. So today we have a panel and just more of a discussion that's open for everybody to be talking as a follow-on discussion of what happened with after the VDay discussion, where we were talking about a lot of the relevant issues that were going around on this topic in the world. So today we have Emily and we have Amanda, a teacher, and we have our two students who happen to be in the same little frame up there, Christiana and Cleo. And so we're just going to go through and just sort of explore a few of these topics, and why it's kind of come up most, well, interesting is not the right thing, but you know, what struck me about this so is that, you know, we see people who've been out walking on the streets and over the weeks, and you see people judging them on television saying, what are these people doing? You know, why are they so selfish? Why are they walking on the streets? And you're kind of hearing this narrative. And then I remember then reading this article many weeks ago about how domestic violence is up 25% in the UK and in the US. And then you see it just getting worse and getting worse and getting worse. And so it really started to highlight about, you know, people's truths and people's stories about what's happening around this. So anyways, I think it's a great time for us to be talking about this and following on from some of the discussions that we had from VDay. And if people have questions, this is really a conversation, right? This is not a panel. We have some people that will participate and things like that. So please just feel free to raise your hand, wave your hand. You know, we have just 10 people, well, 11, now 12 people on the call and some few more people made, but just, you know, raise your hand or put it up in the chat box and I will do my best to moderate. Okay. Does that sound good for everybody? Okay. I will take that as a, so why don't we just start off with you, Emily, just to kind of maybe frame, you know, the discussion a little bit and exploring this around, you know, education. But, you know, do you feel that, you know, education is gender equal? And then I'd love to hear from our two students on the panel and everyone else as well.
Sure. It's nice to see you all. I feel like I know pretty much almost everybody here too. And I know that everybody also has a lot of thoughts and ideas on this topic. So it's going to be interesting to engage in discussion more than talking myself. And maybe just to start us off or to frame it, I know that we've been having these discussions for a number of years now at Green School on the concept of gender equality. And it's integrated into our curriculum. It's one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and it's aligned with our mission for education, for sustainability in so many ways. So in that regard, I feel like education both in itself is not, like a really quick answer to your question, Chris, is that it's not necessarily gender equal, and that there's a number of reasons for that. But I also, as an educator, wholeheartedly believe in education's possibility to incite positive change. And I think that's also why so many of us came to Green School, is that we see this possibility as well. And that means shifting education itself to make it more equitable for students, but also in empowering and enabling students to affect change outside of the classroom and outside of schools as well. I hope that makes sense. And I know that even this topic, the fact that we're students in this topic and talking about world issues, I think is an example of that, and bringing it back to education as well is a nice way to frame that.
And can you just maybe give some examples as to where you see kind of that gender inequality, how it manifests within the education system.
I feel like some people here could probably help me with this question, but I feel like it's a really big question. Amanda's going to help me out in a second.
Okay.
But just one thing I'll mention on that is, like, as Amanda helps me out, I think it depends on the context. It depends on where you are geographically in the world. There are statistics that you could look at that basically demonstrate that girls do not have equal access to education. But beyond that, even in the context of green school, we know that there are inherent privileges that all of us might not be always aware of. And even as educators, we're not always aware of how we might teach differently depending on how we've been also socialized and raised ourselves with cultural values and biases. I hope that makes sense, but I know Amanda had her hand up there too.
Yeah. Well, I see Amanda has some thoughts. And Amanda, you actually, it'd be interesting for you maybe to share a little bit of your perspective of what you were sharing before we kind of started recording this, what you were talking about and sort of what you're going through right now. I thought that was actually an interesting thing to introduce into this discussion as well.
Sure, yeah. So I was going to take what Emily was talking about and really make it quite specific to this situation. But what I was talking about, and I hope we get to circle back around this, is just very women-specific issues during this quarantine. I'm expecting a baby in November, and throughout all of this, looking at how women are being impacted in the way that we can access healthcare, and the way that we can access support, and also the flip side of it can be quite a positive thing. You know, we've seen a shift to midwifery in the area of Canada where I'm from, which is a positive shift. There are some good things and some bad things, but yeah, I think it would be interesting to just talk more on a social level. When we look at access to education, what Emily was talking about with privilege, especially when we have to go online, you look at areas where, women and girls tend to maybe, women tend to make less money. In areas where there's limited access to education, that divide gets further and wider apart as soon as we require people to engage with education through computers. And on the flip side, as we do more written-based and more sort of academic-focused learning, because there's less hands-on learning, we tend to sometimes even favor the way that young girls learn versus more like kinesthetic learners. If we're really boil it down to a very simplistic model. Obviously, there are many nuances to this, but this can potentially limit access in a gendered way, or especially in a socioeconomic way, but also can change the way that students engage with a classroom. So that's also what I think there.
Yeah, and before we go to the two in the in the frame over there. How do you think Green School does a good job of addressing this, Amanda? I mean, do you think Green School is a better model for this, or about the same within your experience?
I mean, I think that because of the our students at the level at which we are learning, they all have access to computers. Our KKC students, we support them through the school has, if they can't access a computer, the school has computers. We have the resources, so that is equalizing in and of itself. But Green School isn't necessarily a microcosm of the broader educational landscape. So I think Green School is doing a great job, and I think the teachers here are especially cognizant of the fact that too much time on screens is hard for kids. It's hard for teenagers. It's hard for the wee ones especially. We are aware of that, so we do a really great job of balancing that out. But I think, it is difficult to implement what we are doing on a broad scale because of that access, because of the inherent privilege of a lot of our students. And
yeah, well, that's great. So, Christiana and Cleo, what do you guys think? kind of hearing a little bit of what Emily and Amanda have been saying and about framing this discussion, kind of what's happening at Green School. I mean, what are some of your observations around this?
Well, we've actually looked a little bit into this for our Greenstone, because what Emily and Amanda is saying, like, it depends where you are in the situation you're in. And we found a couple facts, like let me pull it up so I don't forget what it says. I mean, in the UK in 2018, more than 137,700 girls missed school because they didn't have access to menstrual products. And in Uganda, the average girl will miss 1 to 3 days of school a month due to her period. And this is because when they get their periods, they can't go to school because they don't have the proper hygiene access. There's no toilets. So they end up staying at home, and they literally sit on rocks and mounds of sand all day. And they can't go anywhere, and they can't do anything because they have nothing to treat their menstruation with.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely a comment on that, like, gender inequality within our educational system, because, you know, different students have different necessities, and girls especially, if they are to continue their education, there are different factors that you have to take into account, like menstrual hygiene. And that causes a lot of girls to drop out. The statistics prove that girls there's a higher likelihood for them to enter child marriages because it's easier for them to manage their period and drop out of school at the same time. And so there just isn't enough kind of attention being put to this, and it's not being education, as we all know, especially Green School people, it's not like one blanket where you can cover all students with. It's very individual. But especially with, you know, an entire gender, there needs to be different factors that are taken into account and
I think
recognized.
In Uganda, it's like 57% of girls finish primary education.
And they drop out.
A lot of times it's because they drop out, they can't take care of themselves, and they enter young marriages.
Yeah.
Can I just jump into that? Or you go first?
Go ahead, please.
Just to add to your points, I think it's so great that you brought that up. Just to bring it back to what's going on around the world right now too, is I know that the World Bank and other institutions have put out some concerns that this crisis is going to exacerbate inequalities in gender more than what girls and women are experiencing right now, and levels of access is like what you're describing, even in terms of menstrual products and women and girls not having access to menstrual products. As the economic impacts are felt more fully, it could actually exacerbate the inequalities if girls do not have access to education.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's continue on that topic, because, you know, and that is sort of the, you know, what we wanted to be talking a little bit about here is that, you know, this pandemic has hit. People are in their homes. People are supposed to be feeling safer in their homes. That is absolutely not the case, you know, that we're seeing with the outrageous increase in domestic violence and sexual violence that's happening against women, that's happening in their homes, which is the primary place where it happens, you know, in the first place. So they're told they can't go outside, but when they're stuck inside, they're in the worst of abusive of situations. So what are you guys observing, you know, right now during this pandemic? I mean, what is it highlighting about these inequalities that exist? What are some of the themes or patterns that you're seeing emerging, you know, right now? You know, one of which is this, and we're particularly seeing it in the States right now, about, you know, less access to abortions, and, you know, which is affecting a number of different issues. So what are all of your observations, you know, on that? Go ahead, Amanda.
Well, actually, there's some positive moves in the U.S. with access to abortion, specifically just with I can't remember the name of the organization, but it's something silly like
Dear Jane. Is it Dear Jane?
There's Dear Jane, but there's also one that's like a portmanteau, like tele-abortion or something like that. And it's increasing access by having women just have to call in, and then they receive full instructions based on their, you know, body size and the term of their pregnancy and all of this stuff. So obviously they have less access, but again, just looking at the flip side, sometimes there can be positive things that come out of these crises. But specifically around domestic abuse, and we look at this as a mental health crisis, right? It's both the people perpetrating the abuse and people who are either experiencing it or, in not even that volatile of relationship, but people really struggling. We lose our support networks, especially as women. There's that space where women occupy outside of the home, where they get support. They get support from their families. Their friends see them. Hey, you looked good last week. What's going on here? Why are there bruises? Where's the support network? That ability to go and talk to someone, to have your friends be able to cheer you on if you need to get out of a space. And that's not happening right now because women are in their homes. And I think that's part of it, is that, we're all cut off. We're all experiencing a mental health crisis, and it's happening in so many areas, but it especially exacerbates the problem when it comes to domestic abuse.
Emily, do you have any thoughts on that?
Just to add to it, I know that a lot of us are probably reading these stories about domestic abuse and how the underreporting of domestic abuse is actually alarming right now. The only thing I would add to that is also the idea that schools are often exist as that support network, especially for young women and children of all genders. So the concerns that, and I've read, at least where I'm from in Canada, the underreporting of, like, the decline in rates of reporting of sexual abuse of children and other types of abuse is actually alarming, because coaches and teachers and counselors are actually usually those vulnerable population support network. So only to add to that and to put it into our context for education, I think that's really important for us to highlight.
And we see that too, just to jump in there, teaching sex ed last block, you have this space where you're with the students and you can have these really frank conversations and honest conversations, but it doesn't feel the same over Zoom. And I'm sure Christiana and Cleo, I know you're going to chat, but that's okay. But you guys can attest to the fact that, our sex ed class, it felt, we still did a pretty good job, but it feels much easier to talk about stuff when there's not a camera pointing in your face. You're less likely to say something really brave and get that support. And that's just one context when you're on camera versus being in a physical space with people.
Yeah. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I agree with Amanda in the sense that, I think it was nice because during our sex ed classes, we started to have these really open discussions. And when we transitioned to online learning, it's not that those eliminated, but they just took different forms. And I think some of that openness wasn't as there with the students, which is natural. So yeah, it's the educational system has really shifted through this, and it's interesting, to see how the issues that either existed in the campuses, how they've transferred onto online, or I don't know, what do you think?
Well, and can you expand on that a little bit? I mean, what are you observing? And then I want to go to you as well too, Cleo. Is that like, what are you observing is kind of happening in the world right now, as you're connecting with friends? And I mean, you guys have such, incredible heightened awareness around this topic and speak so openly and freely. And you guys are advocates for gender equality and all the other work that you've done. But are you having observations outside of Green School and outside of our own little community about things good and bad that are happening in the rest of the world around gender equality?
Mm-hmm. I definitely think that this time has, I read a thing where it feels like the earth has told everybody to go to their rooms and think about what they've done. And in that sense of, that was more an environmental comment, but I think people have really some people have, some people haven't, but it's taken time for people to really sit and think about, what's going on within themselves and what's going on in the world. And, that is definitely coming out in different ways, whether, with the domestic abuse rates going higher and, just everything that's going on in the world. I read an article where, 75% of NHS workers are female, and kind of, the inequality that they're experiencing with that. So I think it's in a way allowing these issues to really be increased in a way, whether that's at home or outside.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out when the world goes back to normal, and what's going to change, or maybe what's not going to change. I mean, everything could just go back to normal and then all these problems don't get fixed, or people do something about it. And it'll be interesting to see what happened. I read an article the other day, and this Black woman was working at a railroad, and a white man went up to her and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And she says, "I'm working." And he spit on her, and he had the virus, and she later died from it. And he gave it to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think all this time it's letting stories like that come out, or all the shootings that have happened, and shedding light on issues, I think.
But do you think, but a scary part of this, for me is that, I see it highlighted in the news, the increase in domestic violence, but to me, it's almost like just a footnote. It's kind of, but then it's sort of back to the coronavirus, back to the politics, back to people losing their job. I'm just wondering, like, I don't think we're going to go back to where we were. I don't think we're going to have this, this comment of a return to normalcy, as to what it was. Doesn't mean it's going to be better or worse or whatever it might be. But part of it is we're getting this increase in domestic violence, which, people are maybe rationalizing, well, everyone's at home with each other, there's pressure. And then when we go back, it's like, oh, it's just going, do we really think it's actually, do we think there is going to be effective change on some of these topics that come out of this crisis? Like, I'm seeing good things are going to come out of this in terms of the environment. I see good things are going to come out of this in terms of the economy and shifting, moving to renewable energy. I'm just I'm not seeing this topic as a really, it's not holding its own in the media. So I'm interested in what others are observing as they're looking at things. So I see Emily nodding, Amanda smiling. So, and others, this is a conversation. So please, everybody feel free to chip in, but go ahead, Amanda.
Well, I mean, I hate to be the person who says things like this, but I don't really mind being that person. I mean, domestic violence has never sold newspapers, right? People, like right now, the 24-hour news cycle is feeding itself on garbage and fear, and the thing that's feeding it is coronavirus, and that's what's selling their media. And my philosophy right now is, if I'm not paying for news, I'm not reading it, because it's just so inflammatory. And like, of course, Chris, domestic violence isn't getting as much coverage as coronavirus, because it's a gendered issue, and that is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, but it's the way that things have gone. And maybe this is the time that we shake it up, and maybe this is the time people realize how prevalent and how impactful it is on so many people, not just women and girls, but people the world over. But it doesn't shock me at all that it doesn't get the same coverage. It doesn't get the same attention as something that impacts people of all races, religions, socioeconomic status. Like, coronavirus doesn't discriminate, and it's affecting rich people, and it's affecting people who are struggling. And it got a lot more attention because it started affecting people who were decision makers, people with power.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Please go ahead, Sophie.
These kind of talks, it's heavy, right? And it makes me really depressed. And so how do you guys move with this energy? Because I found for myself that it's better for me to do something, right? To maybe indeed connect with women who are in this situation, or to do something, as opposed to absorbing information. Yeah. I mean, what is it that you do to not elevate the problem? I don't see myself. Of course, I'm part of the solution, but it's of course a really big thing. But how do you elevate your mood? You know, hearing about all this news. What is? How do you consider yourself part of the solution? I mean, for me, it's really at least elevating my mood by just maybe doing something small, by really connecting with people maybe just around me or just reaching out to people around me who I know have a problem. Hello?
Yep. Well, yep.
Oh,
No,
okay.
you just broke up a little bit. Well, what do others think of that? Responding to Sophie, how are you dealing with it, and how are you, how are you handling some of this?
I mean, I'm happy to respond just because like I was the one that spoke, and I think it's a really good point, Sophie. I mean, sitting there and just taking it in like a sponge and then holding it is not helping anyone. And for me, the biggest things that have changed in my life in the last few years that have helped me feel power is the work that I've done with VDay and the work that I did with these lovely humans that are here. That has felt like it's made a big change. And right now, especially, working in, we worked on the sex ed curriculum this year and really making those changes to work with young people and hearing stories of young people that are like, oh yes, I've shifted this thought. Maybe we can plant those seeds. For me, that's the biggest thing. And right now, specifically around my pregnancy, has been reaching out to women and connecting through groups online to see how this is affecting other people and not feeling so alone. Because it's not like I can go to a pregnancy or a birthing class to connect with women, but it's doing that online because pregnancy in and of itself can be a really lonely experience. But, we now have this space online. I don't know about other people, but those are the things that make me feel powerful in this.
Yeah. Christiana, Cleo, what are your thoughts?
Well, Christiana and I were just talking about like, obviously there's sexism in the workplace when you're in person and you're communicating and you're in the building, you're in the office, but how does that translate to online now?
Mhm.
Like, I mean, I haven't heard anything about it, but I'm wondering if anyone else has, because even as a student, like being on a one-on-one call with a teacher, like some teachers it's okay, but sometimes when it's one-on-one with like a certain teacher, it can be very awkward.
Yeah.
And even more uncomfortable than like being in person.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not supposed to be one-on-one with you. But
Well, when you're like waiting
For that reason.
When you're waiting.
Yeah.
All I know at grade school, we've had some students come online and say some, invite other students from other places and come online and say some pretty nasty things to some women, and that, we're in a really safe, loving community, and it happens here. Right. And I'm not sure if that's happening to men. Of course, I'm sure that it is, but at our school, it didn't happen to men. It happened to women.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to analyze how our in-person activities and how like those translate into the online format. And are there new issues that come up, or are they the same? They just take a different shape. Yeah.
Are you seeing? So I'm interested and very interested in your guys' student views on this. Are you? I mean, because you spend a fair bit of time online, and you have a good idea about what's happening sort of before Corona. Are you seeing kind of the level of sexist comments the same now? Is it worse? Is it much less? Is it shifting? Is it different? Are you seeing any kind of different patterns that are coming out of this?
I mean, I personally haven't seen any or read an article specifically on that, but I read an interesting article where it said, now that everybody's at home, are we kind of transferring back into those domestic gender roles and a return of, like, in a sense, the 1950s housewife, where, being at home all the time, it kind of reinstates that power dynamic. And are, those masculine and feminine traits being heightened? And how is that translating into the home life? Kind of a comment on the domestic abuse rates going up. Is there that, sense of having power over the home? And, that's kind of off topic, but I haven't personally read anything on that in specific, but I definitely think that, these things are just taking new shapes.
Well, to answer what you said, I mean, I'm hearing less of like in the school environment, like, when you hear some of the things that the boys say or the girls say that might be sexist, like when I'm at home, I don't interact with those people. I don't want to be around those people. So I find that I'm hearing less of it because I can control who I'm speaking to and who I'm spending my time with now.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, and then I know, and Stephanie, I see you're raising your hand. So go ahead, Emily, and then Stephanie.
Just a follow-up question. I'm actually curious, Christiana and Cleo. One thing that we have noticed over the years, even before this pandemic, is that different technological tools and social media and all those things, those different ways that we communicate now have actually resulted in a little bit more what you could consider like discrimination or sexist behavior. So I don't know if that is something that you're like outside of the school environment that we're seeing as well.
I mean, I think, the issue of whether it's cyberbullying or, comments that are sexist towards people, I think when you're online, it completely eliminates that whole face-to-face confrontation. You can end the call, you can delete the chat as quickly as you want. And so there's that defense mechanism that you have, and it's like a sense of security. And I think that gives people the idea that their behavior is okay and it's easier to control it when they're in an environment where they're typing keys rather than, saying that and immediately hearing somebody respond. And, as you're saying, we've experienced this for years, especially, with the new waves of social media and how that's impacted our culture and our generation. And now with our education predominantly online and our forms of communication, there's definitely, I'm sure, an increase in that and the activity and how people treat others because they have that kind of power over their actions and how they control that.
Well, it's also interesting what you just said, like saying like, because you're kind of hiding behind that screen. Mm-hmm. And even what Amanda said, like you're less likely to say that big thing like in a classroom or that like something speak out when you're on a video call, but relating to what you just said about hiding, like I find it even easier when I'm on a Zoom call. If my screen's not on, I'll be more likely to click unmute and speak. But when people can see my face, I feel less likely to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the option in a class, like even I just keep thinking because these girls are here in our sex ed class, like some of the boys in the class, they wouldn't say it, but in the chat, they'll make a joke. Right? A joke that they wouldn't necessarily say out loud in class because they might get pulled aside and get in trouble for saying something, really inappropriate. But they'll say it in the chat because it's less scary, right? That's why we see that what Emily was talking about online of people posting hate speech that they would never go up to someone's face and say, hopefully they don't say it at all, but of course.
Yeah, I want to, Stephanie and then Joe, but I just want to very quickly just come back to a comment that you just made, Christiana, because you sort of said, well, you're kind of going off topic about returning back to these, I'm not sure if you said the 1950s, but returning back to these roles. But this is what our newsletter is actually about this week, weirdly enough. And I was thinking like, oh, did she read the newsletter? It is about what was going on in the 1950s and about sort of gender roles and various things like that. But I think there's more to. I wouldn't dismiss that as a tangent. I actually think that there's something really quite powerful about it and returning to these roles. And, and we like to also romanticize what the past was like. It was like, oh, life was easy. Life was great in the 50s. Everybody was happy. We had the nuclear family. The man did this, the woman did this. And, these issues that we're facing right now around domestic violence and maybe these new roles that are forming, really comes in about control, right? Yeah. It's all about control, right? In my view, and so, is this going to be a negative manifestation that happens when we're dealing with Corona right now, that these roles get redefined and reinforced. Anyways, it's just a reflection on what you're saying. I think there's something insightful about that. So.
Yeah, and kind of just analyzing since, you know, the 1950s, or when that era was really prominent, and how our generation, how the female gender has evolved and how the male gender has evolved, and what this generation, how that is reacting to these, you know, domestic traits. But, you know, I would say, if I was put in the place where I was the whole 1950s domestic housewife, I wouldn't react to that very well. And I'm sure I know a lot of people who would do the same, but it would be interesting to see how this generation reacts to that dynamic.
Yeah, I very weirdly would actually make an excellent 1950s housewife. and for people who know me, they may get that. So, all right, Stephanie, go ahead with your comment, and then Joe.
Oh my God, there's so much to talk about, especially bringing up 1950s housewife. I should preface this with, I've just finished Untamed, and I'm on my second, not reading, I'm doing it on Audible. So she reads the book, and I have never been I think it happens every 5 years where I'm this affected by a book. I think it's number 9th week or 8th week on the bestseller list. And she's speaking to a lot of women who feel the way she feels and are really resonating with what she has to say. So I wanted to preface it with that. And it's like, she uses a lot of metaphors, and she uses bad words also, but it sort of brought up a lot of anger for me as a woman, as a 53-year-old woman, and I'm just trying to look at that and understand where it's all coming from. But that's one tangent. The first tangent I wanted to talk about was just, I'm loving watching Christiana and Cleo's Greenstone evolve. It's very interesting, and it's fun seeing how it changes. And they were reading it to us yesterday, and when it just struck me as so frustrating that we live in a society where we are shamed for having our period. And at the end of their reading, I said, I really feel like it's the society's way of keeping us down, to make us feel shamed when we go to a waterfall and we can't go into the pure holy water because we are on our period. And it's just, you know, that's not it's not common in America to have that experience. But that to me just feels so disturbing and so patriarchal. And, you know, it's a funny thing, another tangent about just living in Bali. My husband has wanted to buy a place and move to Bali and live here because it's so affordable and so beautiful. And I've really struggled with that. And one way I've struggled with it is that it's so patriarchal here. I'm not really clear what goes on in their compounds. And, you know, we're invited into this culture, but we're not really invited. We're not included in that part of their life. So I feel like they're very kind and very sweet, but it's at an arm's length. And I realized when I came back in September why I just could never live here full time. And it's very patriarchal, and it's a society where the men to me seem more fond of their roosters and their vehicles than they are of their wives and their children. And maybe I have no idea what goes on behind the walls of the compound, but what I've observed, for me as a woman who, you know, supported my family for over 20 years and was the primary breadwinner, and that's a whole nother tangent because our mothers fought for the right for us to do so much more, but at a cost that I think again kind of keeps us down. It's like, do it all, you can have it all, but you really can't have it all. It's impossible to have it all. And I feel like there's a lot of women at my age who went down that path of thinking they could have it all and are sort of at midlife just going, what the fuck just happened to me? And that's why Untamed has spoken to me so deeply. And I really resonate with her personality and her quirkiness. And I've never resonated with a writer I'm obsessed. I go to their Instagram page every night and see what they've posted. They post daily. She's married to Abby Wambach. She became a lesbian, left her husband. And then, so they have this relationship, and they're both have 750,000 followers on Instagram, and they post every day, and it's really funny stuff. And Glennon's an amazing writer. So she's very poetic, using all of her metaphors, and she puts it together so beautifully. And I'm so obsessed that I'm on it every night, like watching it. And Lawrence is like getting a little concerned. He thinks I'm totally obsessed, which I am. So I know I just spewed out a whole bunch of stuff. And to your comment, Sophie, I am not, I mean, I was in Australia when this all started hitting, and it's big in Australia where domestic violence, it was all over the news. So the West is experiencing this, but I'm dealing with a lot of anxiety related to what's happening. So how I deal with it is just, I really shelter. I read Katie Couric, who really tries to put a positive spin on everything. And she also did an interview with Glennon Doyle the other day, which was amazing. But I have to really filter what comes in, or I just get really, my body has been tingling. My limbs and my feet have been tingling since about March 15th. And if I keep stuff at bay, information at bay, I'm much more relaxed. So I know I just threw out a lot of stuff there, but I think, yeah, I think that's it.
Well, I mean, well, yeah, thank you. And Kim had just, please, if you can share some of those people that you've been listening to and stuff like that, if you can just put it on the chat and people can follow. Although Christiana has been putting stuff up there as well too. So, but that's great. But thank you for sharing that, Stephanie. Yeah, that's. And Joe, what, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, well, I don't know if this is going to be helpful, but I was just going to share this interesting, when we had that panel at the school, and do you remember when Luke stood up and made that comment about maybe there is no patriarchy? And I remember what I felt when he said that. Like, there's certain things that make me feel kind of angry, and I went and talked to him afterwards, and had a fine conversation. And I just realized there's a lot of things that I have a kind of knee-jerk reaction to, whether it's, a Trump supporter or people, even just this association or narrative I put around words and people that say something, and it makes me feel upset, right? And early on in this pandemic, when I started to share opinions that maybe were like challenging the mainstream narrative, people got really angry at me and started putting meaning into what I was saying that weren't my meanings, right? Like, oh, you don't care about these people, or you want this to happen. And this was like days into the pandemic. It felt like already, like I would say something, and en masse the reaction was, and then censoring started happening. And I started to think about who are people, like just sort of being on the receiving end of where you say something and then you're kind of shut down, or you receive anger, and people start even thinking you're dangerous. And the one person that really came to mind to me about how I felt that way about was Jordan Peterson. Do you remember? You guys all know Jordan. So I remember listening to him initially and thinking, wow, he's saying some good things. And then he started to say a couple things that triggered me. Like, I don't know exactly what words they were. And then I started thinking he was dangerous. And then anytime I heard him speak, I was looking at him through this lens of, this man is dangerous. Like this, maybe he should be censored. He's saying things that is going to increase violence against women. And I just started putting this narrative on it. And I'm not sure that narrative was mine, or if it's what I'm hearing through the media, because we're all getting this information through the media. And I just started to question all the people that I think I feel angry toward, that I think are dangerous, and I'm not too upset if they get censored, right? And how words can trigger me. And then I saw this documentary called Hoaxed. And if you guys get a chance to watch it, I really recommend it. And it's sort of, they talk about all these sort of kind of hate campaigns that have happened. And the majority, that because they were coming, I guess, a lot from a conservative angle, they were hate campaigns that I had been on board. And to hear the stories from the people that those campaigns were against. Like, do you remember that movie, The Red Pill? This was a movie where a feminist had gone, and she was going to go in and talk to the men's movement, you know, and from a feminist point of view. And I remember seeing her covered on the news. And apparently when she went, I think it was a 4-year documentary she did, and she started to have empathy for some of these men. And when I would hear men, even the panel at Green School, when the boys are there, I'm thinking, them having these thoughts, this is dangerous. This is dangerous. We've got to get through to them. If we don't, you know, it's going to bring down the whole women's movement if we don't nip this early, you know. And these are these thoughts that go through my head, and I don't think they're my thoughts. I think it's a little bit. And what I found when I was listening to the stories of people like Jordan Peterson, he's basically ended up being addicted to painkillers, and you know, I mean, the global hatred that came toward him and wanting him censored, and then the woman that did that movie, who's still a feminist. She's a feminist, but because she was expressing, I guess, giving a voice to these other people, which I, in the past, would think this is dangerous. We can't give them a voice. I mean, sure. Yes, we know men experience some challenging things. Even to hear a mother say, well, what about my boy? What's he supposed, that made me angry. And I'm not saying I all of a sudden agree with Jordan Peterson and everything he says, but there are these hate campaigns, I think, going on purposefully to keep us kind of in a little bit of anger, so that it's, I guess they call it cancel culture, right? Like, as soon as someone says something, that means they're this, and this. So if someone doesn't agree, to me, if someone's like in support of gun ownership, then they don't care about, you know, gun shootings. You know, if someone doesn't support the right to have an abortion, then, well, they don't seem worried about all these unwanted children. Like, I just have these narratives that don't necessarily apply. And even when, I forget the girl that did that, sometimes you got to eat the hamburger, Greenstone, where she went and lived with Trump supporters. And I listened to it, and I thought I was being so kind of woke, I guess, that I was listening to her, and I got a little bit of it, but I didn't really feel it. I still thought that their beliefs, I still kind of looked down on them a little bit. And it's funny now. So I do hope people go and watch that documentary and just see if it touches you a different way, because I'm not saying, I don't think we move forward. I do think it's important for people that have racist and sexist biases to still have a voice. If they've grown up in a world, which we all have, and we shut them down as soon as something comes out, and we can't listen. I don't feel like I was really listening and hearing when I was coming from this place of kind of superiority or anger. And anyway, I'd be interested if and I only really started to let go of some of that and start to feel empathy. I'm still fighting for women and things. I don't feel so angry when I hear a view that is the complete opposite. And I'm trying not to attach. I still think the censorship thing, I think has to stop. And
Yeah.
anyway.
What do, I mean, those are great. I think Stephanie and Joe, I think those are great kind of sharings there. So what do others think about that? And, you know, and on Joe's comment, I mean, are there some voices that should be shut down, right? Which is an interesting thing. So I see Amanda smiling and I see Emily raising her hand as well too. So what do you guys think?
Well, I'm not going to be the one who sits here and says that some voices need to be shut down. It's not, you know, when Jordan Peterson speaks, I feel like my skin wants to fall off. But I think that he has, you know, as much of a right as anyone to speak. I still believe he has a right to speak, even though I want to stick spoons in my ears. But I think that the one thing that came up while you were talking, Joe, is I was watching a comedian a few days ago, and she was talking about how if women could just, you know, if we could get together and pick a thing that we care about, if we put ourselves all together and we cared about one thing, then we could change that thing, you know, and we're really divided. It's like free the nipple, it was her joke, right? She was talking about, she's like, some of us care about free the nipple, and some of us are really worried about like domestic violence, and some of us are worried about the pay gap, and we're all over the place. And if we could pick one thing, if we put all of our energy all together, you know, we could free that nipple, you know, or whatever it is. And I think part of it is a lot of that noise that you're talking about, that red pill, you know, that red pill documentary, the woman, feminist or not, you know, some of this can be a distraction, right? And things that we want to fight about online, and we, you know, in order to kind of take away from maybe the thing that we should all be caring about. And I don't know what that thing is, and I don't think I'm the person to make that axiological judgment, but I think that, you know, sometimes, you know, that division can be part of the problem. Yeah.
Well, look what did the president say the other day about Pompeii? The Secretary of State was getting audited for something, and Trump made a comment that it's okay for Pompeii to use a government employee, to wash his dishes as long as his wife and kid are not around. I read that and I literally I think steam was coming out of my ears. The fact that we have this, I mean, I just have so much anger about who's leading our country in America, but it's just so disturbing that that's part of the language. And I think it's a big part of the language, and it's a big part of the thinking all over the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard the same thing. I was appalled, and it gets right back to what Christiana was saying about these roles. I mean, it was appalling what I was thinking, what in the fuck is coming out of this guy's mouth? Is he actually saying that? It was about, oh, the little woman's not here to do the dishes, so it's okay to spend it. Anyways, it was, yes, I was irate about it as well too, Stephanie. So.
You know, my dad's the same age as Trump, and I witnessed some similar like thought processes that actually my dad kind of reminds me of Trump a little bit, but that's another story. But just in terms of, you know, it's another generation and how they were, and Glennon Doyle believes that, I mean, this is a common thought, that, you know, we're all framed by the age of 7. It's like at 7, we're sort of boxed in, and that's when we start getting culture, society, religion, your parents you start like thinking you're not yourself anymore. You start developing what's being crammed down your throat. And so what Chayton's getting crammed down his throat, as opposed to what my brother at 55 is getting crammed down his throat, as opposed to what my father at 76 had happened to him when he was growing up. We're evolving, but so slowly. Like it's, and the thing that I loved about what Glennon Doyle talks about is, and it was the chapter that I want to listen to again, it's just really sad. It's just about how women don't support other women. And it just struck a huge chord in me in terms of like, I'm in a very competitive profession of photography, but so I kind of wrote it off as that. And there's definitely less women in photography and advertising photography than men, but she really brought out in me just how I wasn't like as supportive as I'd like to be as a woman. And it's ingrained in us. It's like, we're taught how to be that way. And it's a very slow process getting out of that and learning another way. But I do feel like America is, I mean, Northern California, where we're from, I feel like it's pretty evolved there. I mean, I haven't been there for 3 years living full time, but it's, I really miss, I mean, we came to Bali right when the Me Too movement started happening and, you know, all of that conversation. So I was bummed to miss all that, but I am really excited to go back and be a part of the conversation living in America and seeing how I have a voice.
Yeah. Well, don't get too excited. It's not as good as you think it is, even in Northern California. So anyways, and Emily, and then Genevieve, you're after Emily. Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah, sorry. I just to address some of the comments and kind of that were brought up earlier, and I'll try to make it brief because I know that we're running out of time. But just in reflecting on the VDay panel that happened at Green School and just in general, everything we try to do as an institution and thinking about how to progress and affect positive change, I think it's important that we consider, if we take Peterson as an example too, we often bring these voices in as under the veil of critical discourse, and like plurality in voices is what is actually going to like move us forward. And I wholeheartedly believe that. However, I think sometimes the voices that we do bring in, we risk silencing the very people that need that space. And I think we already talked about that and the shame that's felt for menstruation. And the fact that so much goes underreported in the news for domestic violence, and the fact that so much it goes unseen is because we are not opening up the spaces for the people to have these discussions and voices. And that's what our initiatives at Green School are all about. That's what VDay is all about, is opening up safe spaces. And I think when we bring in voices that not necessarily are like intentionally silencing, but they do silence. And I think we need to be really aware of what it is that they are silencing, because that is what scares me sometimes. That's all.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Genevieve?
Thanks, guys. Sorry, I'm having video issues, so apologies. I'm not hiding. Yeah, so can you hear me?
We hear you.
Yep. I actually work as a sexual health nurse, and I'm in Australia at the moment, and we offer termination of pregnancy. And yeah, so the services are there, but it's really interesting how many people have cancelled for so many different reasons, anxiety around offering a service or partners keeping them at home or whatever, just as a side note. But yeah, it's so good to see you all and hear you talk about this, because it's such a massive issue and it really grabs me in the heart. And everything you're saying, there's so much truth in it, and there is all this gender inequality. But I really feel like we talk about all these things so much, and then I walk into a group of young people or a group of parents with young kids, and I hear comments like, boys will be boys, or she's such a tomboy, or, I see teachers lining girls up and boys up, or separating sports teams in primary years when there's no need for it. And I just think that is where our energy has to go. And, as these responsible adults, and trying to think about how we can create change in this space, rather than dealing with, all these insults that come to us as adults and often as women. What can we do with the little people to stop it?
Yeah.
Hi, just a quick side comment. I'm hearing a lot about, people kind of reacting to different views, like opposing opinions, and the question of like, how can we facilitate these open discussions with individuals of opposing opinions and kind of have like an outcome where we learn from each other. Especially what you're saying with, changing the education system to make it more gender equal and more integrated. And I think that we can really, it is really hard to have conversations with people with opposing opinions. I definitely struggle with it. And I think I'm learning a lot from this panel in the sense that people are very open to having these discussions with people. And a way, I'll share it on the link. Just an interview that I watched with Trevor Noah and Tommy Lauren, who is this like far right, very opinionated Trump supporter, and she has her own channel. But the way that they facilitate this discussion and how he directs it, it's a really interesting perspective that they take. And I can share it on the link. I just thought it was kind of on the topic of having these discussions with people that don't share your same views.
I think that's such a valid point, and I know I ran a couple of sessions, thanks for the invite, Emily and Amanda, at the Green School on VDay for some high school students, and that is what works. When you get those people that make the really controversial comments, and that's when people engage and start having debates, and that's how you learn.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Amanda, then go Joe, or Joe and Amanda, one of the two of you.
Okay, I'll talk. Yeah, it's just quick. I mean, I agree, is being comfortable having those hard conversations, but also considering what Emily said and thinking about whether, that's the beauty of a good teacher, a good facilitator, is a person who can be in that space with those hard conversations, but also ensure that the people in the space are protected, right? That is, that people are not being silenced, but the people who have perhaps the controversial view still feel like they have a space to talk, and knowing how to kindly steer that conversation and allow for more voices. I mean, that's what makes a good facilitator, a good teacher. And just thinking back to what Jen said, talking about the words and the language that we use, especially with young children or with teens, and the way that we talk to them as teachers. You would never hear a teacher say, hopefully now, you throw like a girl, or something more gendered and that isn't appropriate. All the ones I can think of right now, I don't want recorded, but something that they would say that would be in that way. But we do, our actions, the way we interact with people also shows that, the way that we interact with our Indonesian teachers, our Indonesian staff, the way that parents speak to the people in their homes also, who are often women, also changes the way our students approach our Indonesian staff, and the modeling that we do is so important, right? And that often is very gendered. And one of the things that came out of a class I taught this year was students being outraged at the way that other students were treating their predominantly female Indonesian staff members. And I think that, that's that modeling that we have to do, and it comes in so many different forms. But I really appreciate that Jen brought that up. Yeah.
Joe, go ahead. And then I know, because we're getting into kind of an hour and 10 minutes. And so maybe if we just have any kind of final closing observations after Joe from Cleo and Christiana and Em and others. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I was thinking also another way to make, maybe instead of thinking of it as of different opinions, but being open to other people's experiences. And I don't know how talking about, like, I've had these kind of discussions, and I didn't quite change until I had an emotional experience of being treated a certain way. And then it just started to made my brain shift. And I actually went and started re-listening to people, even Jordan Peterson. There's this other conservative woman, I forget her name, but I've listened to her in the past, and all I would think is, you stupid woman. Like, everything that came out of her mouth, anything that was coming out of Jordan's. And if we can get to a point where we're not coming from this kind of higher level and anger, when I've gone back and listened to the same things, I actually hear they are making some good points. I don't agree with some, like, they might make something that sounds racist or sexist. And what I learned in this hoaxed movie, which I found interesting, was some of them said that there's been such a campaign against them that sometimes they just for the fun of it, they become provocative and they just say stuff just to be. And I've thought that about some of the people, Chris, on your Facebook, your conservative friends, and they make these angry comments, and I would be like, oh, these people are so uncouth and they're so this and that. And then I realize there's something, it's a really awful feeling to be looked down upon. And there's this, and I wonder if in this whole conversation, if it's, we are being influenced how to think about people constantly through the media. And like, why do they go post those one-liners like what you, Stephanie, and Chris, what you just read? They take a comment one person made, someone else just posted, you know, apparently a Trump supporter made a comment about a Navajo Indian being an immigrant, and that's just posted. And so they are posting stuff all the time to keep us incensed and angry. And then you can't act from a place of listening and empathy. And anyway, sometimes I wonder if we like need to completely redefine the like, come up with a new word other than patriarchy even, because it's such a triggering, I don't know, I hope we come, when I've said in the past, we need to give boys and men a voice too, I can honestly say at the time when I was saying it, I didn't feel it as being as important as I was making it myself out. Like I was acting like I was being so kind of equal and everyone's got to have a voice, but I didn't really feel it. And I now want to go and watch The Red Pill, because there was this one scene where I see this guy speaking and his hands are shaking, and I think there's a way for us to move forward where it's not about, hey, we always have to give the men a voice at the same time, but it's in our language. Like I could have done a better job, you know, making them feel just as important, all that, but if I was educated, if I was trying to communicate with them from a place of empathy and seeing them for who they are versus us and them, I think they would have felt differently after speaking to me. Anyway, I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Joe. I mean, I think these are a lot of things that we want to continue to have discussions on. That's why I think this discussion was important for us to follow on from the last one to continue the dialogue. So Carol is waiting, and not sure if everyone realizes that it's about 12:20 in the evening for Carol in Brazil. So she's up, and so we'll have one more comment from Carol, and then we'll kind of offer you guys to round things out up there. So go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, Chris, it's, yes, 20-1. Okay, so I was just hearing my, like, feeling all this conversation and thinking about, like, my own reality and a woman in Brazil, a country that has a lot of violence at home and that has this very strong patriarchal, if we want to use this word, culture. And I'm also thinking about like the Balinese culture and the way that religion plays out. And I was thinking, I was actually thinking about an experience that I had once I was doing a work as a photographer in an indigenous tribe deep in the Amazon, and to see the different roles and the different ways that they organize themselves in the society, and the female roles and the male roles into the organization of the society and how they deal with that. I'm just thinking like how culturally, when these things are rooted culturally, like they are in the Balinese culture as well, it becomes much harder to break, you know, the chain, I guess, of repeating and perpetuating these inequalities. But how can we, and it's a question, but how how can we still respect and honor tradition in a way? I mean, there is a lot of romantic views about, you know, and traditional knowledge and culture and all of that, you know, but there is a lot of these inequalities that they come from that, they come from this space, you know. So how to balance that in a way that is the respect for culture, but yeah, but with a new narrative. And I do feel here, just coming to the moment now here in Brazil, and that there is also at the same time that there is a lot of violence against women raised inside their homes. There is also like huge network of people coming together and helping and creating channels for people to talk and to be able to speak about and to open a like to pretty much to call police in different channels in different ways and codes. And so it's impressive to see and so important, like, to keep this conversation and to keep people to keep this woman network around that is supporting. So I'm feeling that at the same time that violence has raised, that it's also kind of this, at least here on a local level, that a lot of support for women. Thanks God.
Can I just say one more thing? Just in terms of Bali, I think it's really tough. I just have a quick story. We're having a whole bunch of furniture being made, and there's a woman named Noor, and her husband's name is Idris, and it's in Karabokan, and they're making this beautiful furniture. And in the beginning I did, because I've become accustomed in Bali, you go to the man because they kind of handle things in these galleries and in these workshops. So I was working with him really closely, and then when we came to talk about money, he handed it over to his wife, whose name is Noor. And it was really fascinating. At first I was kind of like, really, this is gonna happen? And she started communicating with us, and I was a little leery. And then we went over to the workshop, and she was just a powerhouse. She just dominated this workshop of about, I'd say 15 to 20 men. And she just was speaking really fast. She knew exactly what she wanted. And I was just blown away by her capacity and her ability. I should say she's from Sumba. She's not Balinese, because I noticed I was starting to think, this woman is not Balinese. And then I asked her, and she said, no, I'm not. But it's just sort of an amazing story, just how I've become the way I think after living in Bali for 3 years. And I just thought I could only work with a man. And then one day we go look at the furniture like 2 times a week. And I looked at her and I said, you really do know that this gallery should be called Noor Gallery, not Idris. And she went into hysterics and started laughing. She said that would never happen in Indonesia. And we had shared a good laugh together, but that to me in a nutshell is Bali. And I just feel like it's so hard here. It's just such a challenge because it's tradition, to make a movement in a direction where women get seen and the respect, and, you know, so I just want to tell that story because it just happened.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you for that. Well, Emily is having to go, and we are an hour and 50 minutes in, and it always feels bad rushing conversations like this because we could sit for much longer time. But why don't we kind of sort of have some closing comments? Emily, you know, you made an interesting comment on the chat. And I think I think there's an interesting back and forth on that. But if you had some comments, and then, you know, Christiane and Cleo, if you had some final comments, and Amanda, that'd be nice just to sort of wrap this up.
Sure, I was just typing them too, just in case. But I think conversations like these are amazing, and I'm so grateful that you guys all came. And you too, the students, that's amazing that you're engaging in these. And like I said at the beginning, this is actually what drives us to a better understanding. And I wholeheartedly believe in that. But just to bring it back to, like, not only the comment that I made, but the idea of addressing gender equity in education, I think it starts with recognizing, using our critical thinking skills to actually recognize our own privilege, and be critical of different issues of oppression and the intersection between gender and culture, because I know that that's come up too, but starting with ourselves and recognizing our own privilege, and then hoping to like empower ourselves with that awareness to affect positive change. And that's kind of the mission of VDay. But I often feel like that the space to do that sometimes gets curtailed by focusing more on, I know that that's happened in VDay, and it came up in the panel too, that we had on campus, is that often even when we plan for VDay, we spend more time discussing how to be more inclusive than we do opening up spaces to talk about real issues. So that's the only final comment that I'll leave you guys with, because I think it starts with like talking about the issues of privilege and oppression and how that relates to all of these things. And thank you for including me in this. It's been a great conversation.
Well, you have been a critical driver in this, you know, along with student Emily, who started on the panel, and then the contributions from, you know, from you guys as well too. So thank you for everything that you do. And my only comment is I can't be happier having my kids in green school because of people, parents, students, teachers that are on this group, right? Because these conversations are not happening like this in most other schools. So, you know, and it's appalling what I hear is going on. So I really appreciate, and I have to also just say, like, calling out online, I am so aware of my male whiteness because it's staring right the fuck at me the whole time. It's I don't know what to make of myself, and it's really ironic. And I'm sitting here and I'm surrounded by all these women, and anyways, it's yeah, I'm just kind of thinking, just, you know, just the presence of male in society, and we don't look at ourselves, right? We're only looking out, but, you know, but anyways, it's just it's I kind of I think my demographic is a little messed up. So anyways, Cleo, Christiana, your thoughts?
No, I'm just really happy that I was on this panel. I feel like I learned a lot and was able to hear so many different, you know, opinions and thoughts. So thank you all for, you know, your contribution. I hope that we could do something like this again sometime.
I agree with Christiana, and kind of going back to what I said at the beginning, kind of the outlook on things and what's going to come from all of this. There's a good video, YouTube video online, and it's called The Great Realization. And it's a father, and he's reading this book, and it's supposed to be placed after coronavirus had happened. And he's talking to her about all the good things that came from it. And I don't know, a lot of people are talking about what they're kind of doing during the day. And that video kind of makes me have hope, and that everything happens for a reason.
That's great. Well, I think those are nice ways to just finish on your guys' thoughts as the students. And we're all very appreciative that you guys are here sharing your thoughts. And, you know, as parents and soon to be parents, you know, that we have with Ibu, Amanda, you know, I know we all really honor your guys' perspectives and views on things. So thank you to everybody for coming on to this call, participating, and continuing this dialogue and discussion. Thank you, Carol, for showing up in Brazil, and look forward to having this discussion, you know, further in the fall when we are back together, both online and face-to-face. So thank you, everybody, for being part of this. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris, for putting this together.
Yeah, well, I don't do much. I just support these guys. So anyways, thank you guys. You guys, and thank you, Genevieve, for your contribution. You guys all have a nice day.
You too. Bye.
Guys, take care. Hey, Mom, are you there?
Eleanor. Oh,
Mom, unmute.
she left.
No, she didn't.
Yes, she did.
Do I
Mom,
do share screen? No.
yeah, yeah. And now, no. Don't share your screen. We can hear you now. I've unmuted you. Just click on the video at the bottom left that says
I think
video.
it's dark. I think it's dark. Is she not in front of it? I think the video's on.
Oh, Mom, you're open.
I see something.
Push the camera down from the top. Open
Oh,
the
it's
camera.
not up.
Yeah, open the camera.
Let's see. How do I find it? Oh,
It's right on top, and you just push down, and it'll pop up.
oh, there.
Well, there you go.
Ah,
Yay! Hi, Eleanor.
but
Okay,
do I push
No, you're
share
fine.
screen? No.
No, we see
Okay.
you.
I'm not.
I have to go to the bathroom. Just one sec.
Do you see do you see the three of us in front of you?
I have a white square that says share, and I see Christopher and you in a little tiny blue box, but I can't get rid of this white screen that's blocking Christopher and me and totally you.
Hi, Grandma. Hold on, we're just trying to set her.
I should know.
I'll get Chris to come down and
Okay,
set you up.
select a window. Oh yeah, okay.
Don't press share.
I wanted to turn it on, but I thought I'm liable to hit a button and have everyone vanish.
Right. Well, next time,
Optimize screen sharing.
What is she trying to do?
you don't press the screen sharing. There's where
No,
is?
yeah,
I wish I could see.
I know how to do it.
Well, you don't know what she's seeing right now.
Have her
Select-
call on videos.
Is your camera part of your computer?
Yes.
Okay.
As soon as like the top of my head is showing.
Yeah, no, I can see you. I can see you. But I'm just trying to when Chris finishes going to the bathroom, I'll just send him down to
Oh, okay.
set you up. And then because when you're participating in the call and you see yourself and there's like 16 people talking, is
Right.
that how you've been? Then it feels like it doesn't feel so intimidating to be the person talking.
Right.
Oh, good. There he is. Yeah.
So I didn't know. What did you hit?
I don't know why you had
Wait,
that.
I'm
So
talking-
these are
I'm
different
going
views.
on
Speaker
tomorrow.
view, that's the
Oh.
person speaking.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
Friday.
Then gallery view shows everybody here.
Okay.
This is chat. So you can see the chat. See, people were chatting
Oh.
during the discussion.
Yeah, I read
and
some of it
sharing.
down here. Like what was the
Chat,
name of the
yeah.
book and things like
And then
that.
here's the participants
I don't know.
chat.
Uh-huh.
So there you go. And then get rid of participants. So then you can, now you can see everybody. And then if you want to stop your video, you stop your video.
Oh, okay. I
Start your
almost
video,
pushed,
and
I
then this
almost
is
when everyone was on the screen, but I thought, what if I wipe everyone out?
you won't wait.
Okay.
Sorry.
So Chris, is she seeing all three of us on the?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
uh-huh.
she has the gallery view. Okay,
Right.
Is that how you? Water. Is that how you've been seeing it in up till now, Eleanor?
Right. I'm able to see every one of you, all their squares of each person
Oh, good.
on. And so it's wonderful, but the Norman Ward was black.
Okay. And I
So
think
I couldn't.
I think it was black also because your camera was up.
Yes,
Maybe with
that's
the ceiling.
probably exactly right. But I didn't know that the camera was down, so, yeah.
So was
But
that?
isn't it quite amazing to have, I mean, I feel like I'm just in a classroom learning so much. It is such a treat for me. And to just listen to everyone. I mean, it's truly a gift. It's
Yeah.
truly a gift. There's Christopher back again.
No, you can
But,
say 3 o'clock or something, or say 3. Okay.
Where's, how come Chayton didn't come on the call?
Chayton, why weren't you on the call? I don't know, his door is shut. I told him multiple times.
But but that really was, and I thought that Cleo and what was the other young lady's name? Amanda? No,
Christiana, or the
No.
teacher or the girl?
the two with Cleo, the other gal.
Christiana.
Yeah, oh, right, okay. Because on the screen, I thought it was saying Armanda.
Oh,
Yeah,
Amanda.
that was Amanda.
Oh, okay. But it really, it's such a treat to see everyone
Yeah.
and to listen and the different points of view. And I really enjoyed. I was kind of taking notes, Joe. But is Hoax a documentary or a movie or?
Yeah, I was telling Chris to watch it with you guys because I thought it was so well done, and it made me realize I've felt so much anger toward Trump and Trump supporters. There's been times where I've seen, violence happen toward them, like someone go hit them with a sign or something. And it's not like I'm like, oh yeah, hurt them, but I'm thinking, well, you kind of had it coming if, like no empathy really. And that's kind of, and then when you start hearing, I remember our friend Renee said, it's really hard to dislike somebody once you hear their story.
Yeah.
And then there's also, there's a Black man who's made it part of his life's work to collect KKK uniforms. And he goes and he befriends KKK members and gets to know them and changes their, all of our views are just because of our surroundings for the most part, right?
Right.
And
yeah. Well, remember even the movie, The Green Book, wasn't that the name of the movie recently?
Yeah.
When they started out, they were so, such different worlds. But there's really so many things that we share, no matter what our world is, from whatever world we've come from. But, and then I did not know Jordan Peterson at all. I don't even know the name.
Well,
You can Google him and watch some of his videos.
He's a psychologist. He's a professor from a university in Canada, and he's actually, if you listen to him, he's a real academic, and I've listened to a lot of his things. But at one point, there was a lot of media attention on him because he told I guess there was this law that was passed in Canada that you must address people by their different gender pronouns, right? And there's many now, right?
Oh, right. Instead of he and she.
So there were new gender pronouns being added, and they were making it a law. And he said he has no problem addressing people the way they want to be addressed or whatever, but he doesn't like someone telling him he has to do it, right? He's very much, and I remember, in fact, I was even thinking, do you remember, Chris Matthewson?
Yeah, Chris Matthews, the columnist.
Yeah, and the way I viewed him before he went off air was he's completely crazy. Like he's talking, I was just like, that guy's so crazy. Plus he was being critical of Bernie, and I like Bernie. Right. And he was, you remember he made that comment like, I would be saying, oh, communism, you silly people, it's not Venezuela communism, it's social democrat, it's not socialism, it's democratic social, like all these things which I would hear. But I remember not liking Chris Matthewson's, and then because of how he was speaking, and he was getting so angry, and he made a comment once about, you remember someone was going to get shot in Central Park? Do you remember? And I remember thinking, oh, he's completely lost it. And then, short while later, they come up with him saying some inappropriate things, which my dad would say, like just from that generation, and he's off.
Oh, yeah.
But then now I'm just like seeing what's happening right now with some of the laws and rights and things being taken away, some of it for good reason, but some places it's extreme. I'm like, he wasn't so off he wasn't so crazy. Like things that could happen. Like,
I don't remember, because he just like suddenly said, I'm quitting. Was it because, what,
Well, he was on a bunch of panels where he would go off on this tirade about Bernie and socialism and communism. And at the time, it sounded crazy. And then, and I
who
think
was
what
this? Chris Matthews.
Oh,
He was, I mean, he's been on the radio for years and years, and I wouldn't miss him. I thought he was so fantastic, but then he just began going off the cliff a bit. But that day he just literally in the middle of the program and said, I quit. But I cannot remember what was that? Was someone bringing a sexual harassment charge against him?
Not a sexual harassment. It was inappropriate comments, you know,
Okay. That's right. Okay.
And this is my thing now. Like, so have you heard this thing about outrage culture or cancel culture, meaning as soon as someone says something we don't like, even we're kind of triggered to write them off completely. So if Chris Matthews makes comments that are kind of not, you know, are dated, but then Chris and I make comments too that are part of our demographic. You try not to, but life changes. But in hindsight now, it seems like they just kind of, it's in that context, it looked like it was going off the deep end, and then it looks like they just found something to make an issue of, and he probably just got tired and didn't want to become the next hit piece. But yeah, it's just interesting because what he was saying was not, now looking at what's happening to the world and how in a matter of weeks, everything can change. Like it wasn't, and that was probably, he's lived through, you know, communism and all that. So, you know, instead of discarding him as being a, you know, crazy senile guy, he's, anyway, that was just kind of interesting. So if you guys can watch Hoaxed, so Jordan Peterson, have you ever heard of this group of boys or men called incels?
No.
It's a group of men that they're basically, it stands for involuntarily celibate. So they want to have relationships, but they can't. And I don't know if their reasoning is very healthy. It could be attributed to too many video games, too many, who knows? I'm sure there's a number, too much pornography. Like if you're just playing video games and watching porn, you don't really develop skills to be with a person.